In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is...
My brother tortured me for years, and my parents looked the other way. 10 years later, I went back to face him and discovered his dark family secret. I always believed I could escape my past. I even moved to another continent to leave it behind. But it seems I can't keep running anymore. It's catching up with me, and this time I can't just ignore it. In any other situation, I would never consider being in the same room as the people who have hurt me so badly. But how can I ignore this invitation to a family reunion, knowing what I know now? I wish I had never opened that email I received from my mother a week ago. I hardly ever check the spam folder, but on that particular day, I was looking for a lost confirmation email. I found myself scrolling through the junk emails until, suddenly, I froze when I saw a name that I thought would never appear in my life again: my mother. It had been 10 years since we last spoke. I had erased all traces of my existence. I had even changed my name. I have no idea how she found me, but it was very bold of her to do so, after what she and my father did to me. I would have opened the email and pressed delete immediately, but when the application asked me if I was sure, I paused. I was curious about what she had to say to me. Part of me longed for an apology, an explanation of why my parents failed me so profoundly. Maybe then it could be okay, because the truth is that I still am not. I buried everything about my old life, but at night, when I close my eyes, I return to that painful past. I canceled the deletion and read the email. I scanned it quickly, without much interest. It was just an update about the family and my mother expressing how much she missed me. There was another long paragraph about how sad she was when I disappeared, but that at least now she could sleep peacefully because she knew I was alive and well. However, it was the last paragraph that stayed in my mind long after I closed the email. She was asking me to come home for a family gathering. It was an important occasion because my grandmother was ill, possibly in her final days. She wanted to gather the whole family for a last supper before she was admitted to a hospice. This supper would take place in just 5 days' time. I am on another continent, so it would take me at least a full day to get home. If I decided to return, I would have to face the person I detest most in this world, and my mother knew it perfectly well. There was a section of the letter that she emphasized especially. She told me that she understood how complicated the relationship between my brother and I was, but she hoped that I could see my grandmother one last time. She promised that my brother would behave, that he was now a mature man, a father, a husband. All of that seemed ridiculous to me, because my brother has a terrible track record, and now he's responsible for other people. He's the last person in the world who should be a father, let alone a husband. I don't care if he's changed. People like him don't change, not with what's on their conscience. My mother was completely wrong. She had no obligation to attend that meeting, but thinking about my grandmother filled me with guilt, remembering the kindest woman I have ever known. Visiting her house was the best part of my childhood. It was my refuge from a home that was a real torment for me. When I was with her, I felt loved, protected. I didn't speak to her after I ran away from home at 18. I considered going to see her, but I didn't want to involve her in my chaos. Besides, I knew my parents would manipulate her to try to get me to come back. So instead, I left as soon as I had the chance, escaping the horrors I'm still trying to overcome. I had some money saved and very good computer skills. I moved away from the city and got a job in a computer shop, living in a small apartment above the shop. It wasn't much, but I was free. One day, I served a customer who completely changed my life. He offered me the opportunity of a scholarship abroad that would start in 6 months. I was about to turn 19, with no idea where my life was going and nothing to my name, so naturally I accepted. Over the next 6 months, I erased my digital footprint, which meant deleting all my social media and accounts that mentioned me. I changed my name and took preparatory courses while working. Then I moved for good. I am now 28 and work in security at one of the top tech companies in my adopted country. I am almost fluent in the local language and will be getting married next year. I have had no contact with my family in all this time, and have made it virtually impossible for them to find me. That is why I am still so surprised that my mother managed to get my email. She mentioned in her message how proud she was of everything I've achieved. Maybe she found me through my work. It makes sense, since when I changed my surname, I used my mother's maiden name and a variation of my middle name. I was 19 at the time. It wasn't very clever of me, considering that anyone with determination could have figured it out. The point is that reading that email revived memories of the time I spent with my grandmother. She was so loving and kind to me, my true safe haven. I feel guilty that I haven't thought much about her over the years. And now she is in her final days. I can't believe that so many years have gone by without giving her a hug, without having her tea, without listening to any of her wonderful stories. I am beginning to feel an immense sense of guilt, together with a deep desire to see her one last time. But I'm also afraid, because this will be the first time I've seen my brother since I ran away from home. I'm afraid meeting him will affect me psychologically. Because of what happened, I've hardly been able to process it. Now, all I have left are occasional nightmares. Sometimes I use sleeping pills, but I do so sparingly because I don't want to become dependent on them. I have been thinking about this email all day and all night. In fact, it is 4 a.m. right now, and I have to be at the gym in 2 hours. Then my working day starts soon after. I can't close my eyes because when I do, the pain and guilt for my grandmother assail me. I wonder if she is suffering right now, if she holds a grudge against me for not having kept in touch with her. I don't know. I don't even have her phone number and she doesn't use social networks. I don't know what to do. The only way I can communicate with her is through my mother, who left me a number I can call. She still has the same number that I memorized when I was 7. They are still alive and happy, sleeping peacefully, while I deal with all these demons in my head. Things haven't changed much, have they, Mother? She is still so manipulative and knows exactly how to get what she wants. She knows how much I love my grandmother and that I would never consider returning if it weren't for her. I feel completely lost. I have no idea what to do. Do I ignore the email and get on with my life, even though I am consumed with guilt? Or do I go to the family reunion, knowing that this will almost certainly be a complete disaster because of the conflict between my brother and me? I am 100% sure that there will be problems because I am no longer the helpless young girl I once was. I know he will try to provoke me, but this time I won't allow it. I won't let him make me feel less than a human being. Not for 1 second longer. Nor can I bear to be in the same room as him, knowing that he still goes unpunished for what he has done. That my parents ignored his actions and now expect me to simply share the table with him. It's disgusting. Update 1. 6 days have passed. I did it. I booked the flight and went home. It has been interesting, to say the least, especially facing the ghosts of my past. However, there have been some very good moments that make it all worthwhile. For example, seeing my grandmother for the first time in 10 years was incredible. Discovering that my mother wasn't lying about her illness, not so much. Although I wouldn't have liked her to lie either, because she would have tricked me into going there. My grandmother has aged a lot in that time and is now in a wheelchair. Despite that, she was the happiest person when she saw me arrive. Seeing her made me forget, even if only for a moment, how uncomfortable it was to be in the same room as the brother who destroyed my life. Yes, that is something I can never forgive him for. I understand that some things may seem like simple games or misunderstandings, but this is not the case. I have seen true evil, and it has my brother's face. Once he threw me into the pool knowing full well that I couldn't swim. Then, as I fought desperately for my life, he laughed. The only thing he hadn't done was bring an electrical device with a long enough cable to threaten me with while I was in the water. The reason? I hadn't done all the chores that were his responsibility. I had to apologize and give him my money for a whole year to leave me alone. On top of that, he would hit me every time I said something he didn't like. He was 6 years older than me, and he was still living with our parents when all this happened. I told them what was going on, but they didn't care at all. They were hardly ever at home, and they left him in charge. They told me to stop crying like a little girl and to start getting along with him. My brother would starve me for days just because I looked at him the wrong way. I survived on nothing but water and didn't even dare to take a bite. Somehow he always found out and would beat me until I couldn't breathe. Sometimes he threatened to break all my electronic devices and blame me. He did it once, and our parents replaced them, but they believed it was me. He told them I had a tantrum. I was grounded for weeks and didn't get to go to summer camp because of him. Once, I was so exhausted that I didn't hear him knock on the door when I got back, and I ended up sleeping outside. When I finally let him in, he was surprisingly calm. That night, I woke up surrounded by frogs. Yes, frogs jumping all over my bed. When I tried to open the door, it was blocked. He had tied the handle around the radiator. I had to sleep curled up in the corner of my room. I couldn't use my bed again for days, and could only rest on the sofa during the day, when he was at work. He did worse things to me that I can't mention here. What I've just told you is just the intermediate level of everything he made me suffer. Basically, he drove me into a deep depression, and I started to lose focus at school. When I told my parents, they accused me of exaggerating. Even when my grades dropped significantly, instead of helping me, they called me a failure and told me to stop blaming my brother. And let's remember that this was a grown man with a job, intimidating a defenseless child in this way. Seeing him again brought back all those painful memories. Imagine how I felt when, after talking to my grandmother, he invited me for a drink. I feel sick just thinking about our first conversation after so many years. I can't do it. I don't think I can talk about this now. I was wrong to think I was ready to face him. Maybe I should book a flight back and forget this all happened. Update 2. Sorry for abruptly interrupting the last update. I was feeling overwhelmed as I recalled my interaction with my brother. It was very unpleasant because he acted as if he had done absolutely nothing wrong. The way he looked at me and occasionally smiled, I can't explain it. It's the same smile he wore after getting away with hurting me. I wanted to ask him why he did it. The question was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. He still seemed to have a lot of power over me, and it almost made me forget the real reason why I had come back. I went back to visit my grandmother. As well as other family members, my brother was also there with a woman, who I later discovered was his wife. We had dinner at my grandmother's house, where my brother drank quite a lot. The dinner was tense because he was restless and out of control. His wife seemed so embarrassed that I felt sorry for her. Apart from that, the dinner passed without further incident. I returned to my hotel room, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw when I left. My brother was holding his wife's arm tightly and looking at her with absolute contempt. I wondered what his life would be like now that he had a wife. Was she his new victim? I decided to extend my stay in the city. I planned to stay for quite some time because I was finally taking legal action against my brother. I wanted the world to know what he did and for him to answer for his actions, even if years had passed. I decided this when I returned. I didn't care that he was now a husband and father. He needed to pay for his actions, especially since I knew he wasn't the only person my brother had hurt. A couple of years ago, I did some research on him and found additional information that showed that his abusive behavior was not new and was not exclusively directed at me. He had been expelled from school for harassing a child and sending him to the hospital. I am convinced that there are more people he has hurt. I hired a private investigator to look for these people, but for now, my brother has already been legally notified. He was handed the documents a few hours ago, and he has already sent me messages expressing his dissatisfaction. He asks me why I go back to the past and stir up things that, according to him, were left behind. He claims that he has already overcome all that and would like me to just heal. My parents arrived at the hotel a few minutes after my conversation with my brother. Let's just say they are not at all happy with the drama I am supposedly causing. They asked me to stop everything and drop the charges before the family found out. They allowed all this to happen right in front of them. I have scars, both physical and psychological, from what he did to me. I don't care what the family finds out. I suspect that many of them already knew the true nature of my brother. My parents explained to me that my brother was a troubled person until his 20s, but that he didn't deserve to go to prison. So I asked them if they knew that I wasn't the only person he had hurt. They looked at each other, and that look said it all. For years, I have been keeping an eye on my brother, and he has several other victims. Some have not spoken out because they are afraid, and I know that he continued to hurt people until about 2 years ago. My father ordered me to return to my country, saying that I was only bringing trouble to their lives. He then complained to my mother that she should never have contacted me and warned her that bringing me back would only cause conflict, so I threw them out of my hotel room. Barely 10 minutes had passed when I received a message from an unknown number. I need to see that man behind bars, and I won't rest until that day comes. And if possible, my parents should go with him, because they are just as responsible as he is. Update 3. A few months have passed, and I have been constantly traveling between 2 countries. I think I have permanent jet lag at this point. I'll deal with that when everything calms down, but for now, I'm staying active thanks to the adrenaline. I did not drop the charges against my brother. I found another person willing to add more evidence against him, and that was enough to strengthen the case because of his closeness to my brother. I'll tell you more about this. Meanwhile, I have also located one of his most important victims during his years as an abuser. For a long time, I had been looking for the boy that my brother sent to the hospital, but I didn't even have his name. However, I have finally been able to find him. We are already preparing the legal groundwork. This boy, now an adult, has hearing problems because of what my brother did to him. It turns out that my brother used to harass him to get money from him and to make him do his homework, until one day everything got completely out of control. He beat him so brutally that another student found him unconscious, and they had to rush him to hospital. My brother was expelled, but being a minor at the time, he didn't receive a prison sentence. With his testimony and mine, we managed to convince the court that my brother had tried to take his life and that he had caused me severe psychological damage. I even had my psychiatrist send detailed reports. She explained that I have been so traumatized that I still suffer from recurring nightmares. But that wasn't the most shocking part of the trial. The real surprise came when my secret person took the stand. His wife, who had actually entered the witness protection program. She disappeared from the city without telling him where she was, only to reappear in court and completely destroy his reputation. He informed the court that he isolated her from her family and friends, prevented her from working, and forced her to become pregnant repeatedly. So far, she has suffered 4 miscarriages. He stated that when she was pregnant, he would become extremely violent towards her, causing the loss of the babies. He also mentioned that when he drank, his behavior was even more terrible. And not only that, she was also the victim of horrific acts in her marriage, on multiple occasions. He also did even more disturbing things to her that I can't even mention here. Yes, as terrible as what he did to me as a child. He was very skilled at hiding it, and most people thought he had changed. But in reality, he was still a monster. And the most shocking part? My parents knew everything. They helped him hide it. And they did exactly the same thing as when they protected him after what he did to me. That's why the prosecution brought separate charges against my parents. What finally made my sister-in-law say enough after enduring this torment for so long? That night, the night I arrived. He didn't just hurt her, but also her 3-year-old son, that same night. She said she couldn't get out of bed for days, and it was a miracle she survived without medical attention. And what was my brother's defense? To blame others. He claimed that he had serious anger issues, that he told our parents, but that they never listened to him and that they ruined his life by forcing him to take care of me while they were on vacation. It's true that our parents were never there when we needed them. In fact, my brother was much worse when they were absent. It was as if their cruelty intensified then. I have no idea if there is any truth in his version, but that doesn't make me forgive him at all. The only thing that consoles me is that he has been found guilty. The sentences will be announced in a few days, and I can't wait for that to happen so I can finally leave this cursed city. I've come to hate going back, because every time I do, it's for his trial. He's tried to drag the process out as long as possible, as if he wanted to make me suffer even more. The only positive thing is that my grandmother is still holding on. And all these trips and time I've spent in this hellish city have been less difficult thanks to her. Update 4. 2 more months have passed. First of all, my brother was sentenced to life imprisonment, an appropriate prison term for everything he did. And besides, he still had several cases pending against him. My parents knew about this, so they were charged with obstruction of justice and sentenced to between 6 months and a year in prison. I only found out about this later, but they gave up the rights to their house to protect themselves financially. So now my brother had the rights to the property, and they were financially secure. And if anything happened to my brother, the house would become mine. I had no idea about this arrangement and probably never would have found out if it hadn't been for the fact that my brother died 2 weeks after being sentenced. Apparently, someone in prison found out that he liked hurting women and children and decided to take justice into his own hands. He had 14 wounds on his body. He died instantly. My parents had other family members call me to inform me of this just as I was preparing for my wedding. I had decided to marry my fiancé as my nightmares had disappeared and my brother was in prison. I was not affected by his death. He fully deserved it. If I had been in his place, he would not have shown any compassion for me. I refused to postpone my wedding, claim his body, or give him a funeral, as I was the only family member available to do so, as the rest of the family refused to organize a funeral. He had become a complete outcast in the family, so the state took care of burying him. I hope they put him in an unmarked grave so that he will be forgotten and his son will never know who he really was. My parents were furious with me for abandoning the family. They had a special request for me. They asked me to transfer the deed to the house to someone else in the family, or to find someone to take care of the family home, the same house where they made my life hell while ignoring what was going on. And that's when I discovered that the house was now in my name. I was in complete control. And believe me, it felt incredibly liberating. I got married and then booked my honeymoon in a city close to theirs. I assured them that I would take care of the arrangements for the house, and I did. I sold absolutely everything inside and got about $100,000, even after drastically reducing the prices. I divided the money between my sister-in-law and the young man my brother left with hearing problems. The other victims did not want to accept the money and suggested I donate it to aid organizations. Then I had the family home demolished and sold the land. That brought in another $100,000. I divided that sum into 3 parts, and I donated my share to an organization that supports abuse victims. I know some people will think that selling the house as it was would have given me more money, but for me it was the house of nightmares, and I didn't want to know that it was still standing. I feel a certain amount of pity for the buyers of the land because I have the feeling that they will build a house in a place with very negative energy. I know I'm exaggerating with that comparison, but the trauma it has caused in my life is enormous. When my parents found out that I had demolished the house, my phone wouldn't stop ringing every few days. But fortunately, they didn't have unlimited calls in prison thanks to my actions. When they get out of jail in a few months, they will have to start their lives from scratch. Since then, I have blocked calls from the prison and moved back to my country for good. Update 5. My parents tried to sue me for what I did, but the case was immediately dismissed. There is nothing they can do against me legally, and that gives me inner peace. They also tried to contact their daughter-in-law to see their grandson and try to find peace, as they themselves put it, but she gave them her version of peace in the form of a restraining order forbidding them to go near their son or her. Since they were released from prison, they have asked several family members, including my grandmother, for financial help, but she has refused to give them any support. They have nothing, because they spent it all on legal expenses, both for their own trial and for my brother's. They have written another long email, but this time I decided to simply delete it. There was nothing in it that could interest me, since I am in daily communication with my grandmother and hope to visit her soon. If their lives in prison were difficult, they will not improve significantly now either. It is virtually impossible for them to get well-paid jobs again, and the most they can aspire to now is menial work. The only thing that would make me happy would be if those jobs were under very harsh conditions. I have tried to convince my grandmother to move to this country with us. I know she would like to. But she still has other relatives there, although my parents are no longer included in that circle. Besides, her health is very fragile, and taking an international flight is completely out of the question. I understand, but every time I go back to visit her, she looks weaker. I am grateful that she has survived for so long, although every time I return, I fear that it will be our last goodbye. At least I am grateful that she has lived long enough to see that justice was done for me and the other victims of my brother. I even know that it comforts her to know that her great-grandson is safe and away from harmful people like his father or my parents.